Hi, welcome to New Filmmakers Los Angeles in partnership with Movie Maker magazine. I'm Carolyn McDonald and I'm here at Emerson College with filmmaker Ben Lopez to talk about his film Kurosawa's Grave. Let's take a look at a clip.
What does Japan mean to me? Japan essentially means to me two words, Akira Kurosawa. That's how I discovered Japan.
What's really amazing is that not only people and critics and audiences loved Kurosawa's films outside Japan also, but Hollywood filmmakers were very inspired by Kurosawa. I had heard that Kurosawa's grave is 1 hour away from Tokyo. It was like this connection I've had since my teenage years to Japan. I had to make that connection real.
So Ben, welcome. Thank you for being here with us today. So tell us, you have had such an illustrious career as an administrator for film. Talk about that a little bit and how that led you into being a director now.
Yeah, many years ago I volunteered for two different entities. One was the Telluride Film Festival. I worked for the press desk, and it was a great introduction to the masters of cinema, and basically it was like cinephile heaven at that festival. And the same year, I also volunteered for NALIP, the National Association of Latino Independent Producers. And at the same time, I was pursuing independent filmmaking. So after so many years of supporting thousands of filmmakers, helping to fulfill so many different careers and connecting, elevating BIPOC and Latino communities, I felt that it was time to get back to my roots, my producing roots. And now I'm creating content, and so here we are.
Here we are, and yes, so tell us, your film Kurosawa's Grave, what a journey. How did you meet Asim, and what inspired you to make the film?
So it's Telluride was my lucky festival. So I met Asim because he was always covering films at Telluride, and the producer that brought us together, I guess it was because I started volunteering for so many things. It was my year of saying yes to everything. I had a lot of bucket lists, including visiting Japan. I wanted to do all these different things. And they saw my hustle and the hard work, specifically a producer that I did APK packages for. I was really good at cameras and filming and film producing and everything. And they asked me if I was interested in traveling to Japan to covering different things, including a production technology show, Interbeat, which is I think one of the most important production technology shows in the world, based out of Tokyo, Japan. So all of these people were butting together, including Asim, who I met at the festival, and we started traveling the country. Obviously, we did the work first. We covered this production technology show, and we realized that we obviously love film, cinephilia, and we just kept talking about Kurosawa and Osu and all these masters of cinema, and I felt like, wouldn't it be great if we actually pay respects to him at his grave, and maybe I can follow you along with my camera, because I was actually running camera back then. And he said, yeah, why don't we do that? And we just talk about the impact of your life with Kurosawa's films, like how did that happen? So I followed him along. It became a journey. It happened over the course of 2 years. And we just kept going back and paying that, homage and pilgrimage to and respects to his grave, and his legacy. Asim, he's very prolific. He's based both out of New York and India, and he's very well known in understanding world cinema, but also the best way to reach audiences with films that have the highest form of cinema. And so that's what I really love, hanging out with them. And over the years, we finally got the footage completed, done. I prioritized getting it done after I stepped down from my role. I decided to start consulting in the industry, and I finished Kurosawa's Grave with the help of many different friends and allies. And now the result is this 13-minute love poem to the master of cinema.
Yeah, it's a really wonderful, wonderful film. I totally enjoyed it. And you said it was over a 2-year period?
Yeah. Well, we traveled so many different times, but then we hone in on the idea of paying respects to Kurosawa. So it did take about 2 years to, especially because we wanted to get a little bit more context for, we wanted like that Men of the Street sequence. We wanted to know if because we were a very specific audience, right? People who already love cinema.
Right.
But we were curious about, is the general audience, it's a great, good thesis, are they consuming this type of cinema as well? And we went on the street to look for that.
Right.
And we found that it was basically the equivalent of being here in the States, and you ask anybody off the street, well, LA is a little different because everybody's so exposed to cinema, but let's just say in New York, you ask anybody, it's like, do you know who John Ford is? You know, and they might be like, I don't know, it's kind of like an old cinema. You can tell that people are now really seeped into that. Also, my other thesis was that a lot of audiences, like BIPOC and Latinos, we didn't grow up with a lot of this. I mean, earlier, I heard you discuss that it was harder to find this cinema, like the 35 millimeter copies of the Masters of Cinema, and you had to go to specific places to find it.
Right.
Now with the streaming, it's interesting, right? Now you have all the cinema available, but are people choosing to watch it? Or would they rather watch Stranger Things? Or binge something else?
Right, and that's what I was going to ask you the next question. When you did the man on the street interviews, and I'm assuming you did more than was included in the film, and these people had not heard of Kurosawa in most cases, or they heard a story. Right, so what did you take away from that in terms of what it told about their culture and their knowledge of the culture?
It was a very powerful statement, because then you think, as a filmmaker, what is my legacy, right?
Correct.
So I always think of, like, what was Kurosawa's thinking as he was making all those films? He wanted to pay, but because, by the way, Kurosawa is a descendant of a samurai family. So he wanted to pay respects to that period, but he was also doing a lot of metaphor and commentary, a lot of anti, fascist statements, and a lot of his, like, he was very much influenced by Shakespeare and a lot of other sources, a lot of Hollywood films. He grew up with that. So I was thinking, as a filmmaker, you always want to make an impact, leave a legacy. What is that memory that lingers on? If you're not on a Criterion collection, obviously he is. But what happens when the man on the street, someone, doesn't remember you, doesn't have that memory of those films? And I always thought that's a strong statement for anybody. You want to, I guess it's beyond an ego thing. You want people to remember you and your films and the messages that hopefully you have with your films.
Yeah, and to your point, like, how did you grow from this experience? I mean, I don't know if you can speak to Asim's, along this 2-year journey, how did you, what evolved for you as a person and as a filmmaker during this period?
I had a funny take on film criticism, because I had a really mixed emotion. When I actually, when I took a film criticism class, I remember a teacher made a general statement about, I think it was Sofia Coppola's film, and she was saying, oh, the reason why this particular scene is green, blah, 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 is because she wanted to convey the toxicity. This is Virgin Suicides. I don't know if you remember that movie. And I remember watching I cheated a little bit. I watched the DVD, the making of, and I'm like, no, it's because they ran out of that stock of film. The reason why is because they couldn't match the color timing, and that's why it came out green. And so I had a different take, and so I didn't really understand film criticism to that level. I thought that it was just a way to dissect things and try to extract meaning out of something that was very straightforward. Like, they're just running the camera. The lighting just happened to be that way. Maybe they were inspired. Maybe it was intentional. A lot of the things that we overthink about. But then I realized that there's a lot of things that you do very subconscious, and you're still working on that thesis and carrying out that message, the unifying message of a film. So with Asim, I wanted to get behind the film criticism brain. But you know what I ended up finding? His soul.
Wow. And during the course of this journey, again, aside from the physical filmmaking and style of Kurosawa, you just spoke to what his films meant and the things he wanted to leave as a legacy. What were the takeaways for you and Asim about the stories Kurosawa chose to tell?
One of the first things that we discussed was that, why did you watch all these Kurosawa's films? And in the beginning, I had a list of, I think it was AFI's list, 1,001 films or something you needed to watch, and then Time's list of films that you got to watch before you die. So when I started out in my career, as a filmmaker in my 20s, I was just knocking them out, like just checking, and I didn't take the time to actually enjoy them, letting them hit my solar plexus. With him, he confirmed that secretary that you need to let that go. It's not a question of just consuming the content and hopefully you're gonna become a better filmmaker. It's like you got to kind of live with it, take time, discuss the film. I read a lot of film essays, and obviously I subscribe to all the platforms on filmmaking, but there was something that he brought that was very personal that really changed my perspective, especially on Kurosawa. I already respected him. I always thought of him as a film god, right?
Sure.
But when he brought it down to home and all the stories, and I got to actually walk in a lot of the areas in Japan where he filmed a lot of those films, that's where it really hit me, all of it. So this film, it's 13 minutes, so we couldn't fit everything that we shot, so we wanted to give something. Because, by the way, we knew the attention span of an audience was about 10 minutes, especially for this type of content, right? So anyway, we made, hopefully, a perfect introductory, kind of, this is going to tease it so you want more. So I'm hoping that people, when they see the sequences of Kurosawa's film clips, they want to go and treasure hunt.
Right.
And I'm hoping that inspires them to also be impacted in their own life.
Yeah, I hope so too, because the clips you used are really wonderful. I love, there was a couple of films I didn't know of, and I really loved seeing them. Just the cinematography was so breathtaking, you know.
And the influence of it.
And the influence of it. So how, speaking of influence, how did this influence you as a filmmaker going forward? How did this experience and, you know, watching the films going forward for your future projects?
I think before, for me, I felt that I was very much on the technical side. I thought that's one of the reasons why I love going to Japan, to learn the cameras. I needed to know what sensors and this, lenses, glasses. I was so much into the equipment aspect of it. I was also inspired by, for example, Robert Rodriguez. I felt like, oh, if you had the equipment, and you could really democratize this film movement, being a true independent, just own the equipment and go out there and make your movies. And I felt by knowing and hacking my way into it, I felt that that was gonna make me a better filmmaker. But I already knew that I was missing that key component, making sure that I was marrying the literature, the influence that they had with other films. Like, for example, I just saw Bardo, right, by Iñárritu. We're talking about 50 plus years of experience, and not every single frame in that film is influenced by all of that. Metaphor, Mexican metaphor, and so on and so on. And for Kurosawa, there was so much reading that I had to do to really understand, and also read some of his diaries. I actually started reading like his collection and every interview that he had. And some of it, by the way, I did it after I completed the film.
Wow.
So that really brought everything home for me. So I found that Kurosawa, again, you know, I put him on that pantheon of the greats, but not just because of his technical ability, his ability to translate that, you know, what he wanted to say, but because he was able to weave it in a very masterful way.
Yes. Very.
And he had soul. He captures the humanity.
Yes, and he did, even though the specificity, what you're talking about, the technical, he's able to make things universal, and from that soul place that everybody over generations, 70, 80 years later, is able to identify.
It's life-changing.
Yeah, it is. It is. It is.
So I feel like I'm a better human being, not just a filmmaker. I think like I've learned so much, but I think it actually elevated the goals that I wanted to achieve as a human being and with art.
That's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. There was a moment in the film I thought was so interesting when you were looking, or Asim was looking at the posters for Western movies at the flea market or something they were selling. Talk about that a little bit, because there's something that he said about the perception of American films. It wasn't Rambo was a poster for Rambo.
It was Saturday Night Fever.
Saturday Night Fever, that's what it was.
St. Ives.
And
with,
St. Ives. Charles Bronson. So tell us about that a little bit in terms of what you saw that we didn't see on camera about their perception of our movies in the West, and what kind of influences you think that American cinemas had on.
Yeah, it definitely impacted so much. Obviously, World War II is definitely a deep scar that left it, but because of that, the introduction of cinema, the American kind of like movie making, you can see almost like, you know, the State Department was very much involved in making sure that American, you want to call it propaganda, and a lot of films that really embody that American idealism and exceptionalism, it embedded everything. And so Japanese culture, even though we're talking about thousands of years of traditions and everything, it was heavily impacted by American cinema, and you can see it everywhere. However, the filmmakers that started bringing back those roots was like the Kurosawas of the world. But so when you see these posters, a lot of them so funny. It's like exploitation movies that are influenced by American movies. There's also the art movies that didn't get a lot of distribution, so those posters are very unique. So mostly academics or cinephiles understand the impact of those posters. But then what I became obsessed was the Japanese version of American movies. I started collecting those posters because of those trips to Japan.
They were interesting.
So I remember seeing films that, like, for example, The Rain People by Francis Ford Coppola and George Lucas, all that collaboration between them. I actually got that poster, the original, and I brought it back home, and I actually had Francis Ford Coppola sign it because it was one of his first films, and I always felt like, ooh, that captured a very special moment in cinema, the '60s, when all these people were working like a brat pack
really great,
together.
yes.
So,
amazing
but then
period.
it was the Japanese version of that. So to me, it's the lens that you see it, and the poster is one of the most permanent artifacts that you can have to appreciate it.
Right, right. Now, is there any specific poster that you could see how it was drastically different in Japan than it was in America that you, off the top of your head?
Yes, one of the things that I found is that it's, instead of obviously the titles, it's everything image driven, so they will overload the actual, not just the 3/4 of the face and all of that, they will put the entire body just so they could recognize the movie stars. I've noticed that they rely a lot more on that because to them, the translation of certain titles doesn't translate to a Japanese audience. The meaning's completely lost. So they need to see the face of the star. And so, but then they overload it with like 3 different poses of a movie star in the poster. That's what's really interesting. There were other really interesting takes like the type of face and the color scheme and everything. They're definitely collector's items. So every time I'm actually traveling this winter, and I'm gonna be going back because I want to pay respects to Kurosawa again after the completion of this film.
Oh, fantastic!
So I'm definitely going to be borrowing. I'm going to be bringing back more posters.
Right. Do you plan to screen the film there?
Yes, I'm working on a special screening over there.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I want to get to. I'm going to see if I can somehow get surviving members of the family or maybe the foundations to maybe do a special screening. We're talking. We're trying to figure it out.
Oh, that's fantastic, fantastic. So tell us, so what else have you got coming up, and where can we find you? Where can everyone find you and see what you've got coming up?
Well, this is a short thesis because I want to do a series where I follow different film critics all over the world, starting with the U.S., obviously access to film critics that I have here, and figure out an artifact or a film that maybe they were impacted by, and follow them on that journey. And I would love to do either a 10-minute piece, it could be a web series, or if the proposals gets a little bit more traction, do 1 hour episodes. So 10 episodes of 10 different film critics, paying homage to their favorite films or filmmakers.
That would be fantastic. I'd love to see that. I totally would watch that. Absolutely.
And I do have other narrative stuff. I do have some documentaries coming out, but I'm definitely committed to creating content that really reflects the influences that I've had. And because of my background working with thousands of filmmakers over the years, now I have plenty of people that really want to champion and they are supporting my own endeavors now. So I feel very lucky. Now I get to tell my own stories.
You get to say, so where can people follow you, telling you and support you?
Yeah, well, right now social media is a little funky with all these different platforms kind of going down, but I'm on Instagram. I'm under Ben Viento Fuego. I do have a consulting business, L21 Media, L21 Consulting, and with that, if people want to work with me on the professional side, but if they want to follow my film career, I guess Instagram is the one that would make the most sense.
Okay, fantastic.
So, and I'm out there.
All right, well, we'll be watching. We're looking for you. We're looking for you. All right, well, thank you so much for being with us here today, and I can't wait for everyone to see your wonderful film.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.